Did you know that a country can have a booming GDP while the majority of its citizens struggle to make ends meet? GDP alone hides the shocking truth about wealth inequality. We'll break down how per capita GDP, PPP, and nominal GDP reveal the real story behind the numbers. GDP, or gross domestic product, is like a country's report card. It tells us the total value of all the things a country makes, goods and services, in a year. Think of all the cars, computers, food, haircuts, and doctor visits. GDP adds up the value of all of that to give us one big number. Now, there are different ways to calculate GDP. Nominal GDP is the simplest. It just adds up the value of everything using the prices from that year. But there's a problem with this. Prices change over time. If prices go up, inflation, nominal GDP will look like it's growing, even if the country isn't actually making more stuff. That's why we have real GDP. Real GDP adjusts for inflation, so we can see the actual economic growth of a country. Per capita GDP is another useful number. It takes the total GDP and divides it by the number of people in the country. This tells us the average economic output per person. It's like saying, if we split all the money from the GDP equally, how much would each person get? This can give us a rough idea of the average living standards in a country. For example, a bright economics student from India might use this to compare India's average economic output with other nations. But it's important to remember that this is just an average. It doesn't tell us how the money is actually distributed. Some people might have a lot, while others have very little. Then there's PPP, or purchasing power parity. This is used to compare GDP between countries by taking into account the cost of living in each country. $1 might buy you more in India than it does in the United States. PPP adjusts for these differences so we can make fairer comparisons. For example, a seasoned policy advisor in the UK government might use PPP to understand how living standards compare to other countries. A financial analyst from the US will use the GDP indicators to give informed investments in the US market. GDP and its variations are useful for understanding a country's economy, but they don't tell the whole story. They don't include things like unpaid work, like taking care of children, or the damage that economic activity does to the environment. Also, a high GDP doesn't necessarily mean everyone in the country is doing well. There could be a lot of income inequality, with a few people getting very rich, while many others struggle. While this video explains the basics, some complex issues remain. The informal economy, for example, is often not fully captured in GDP calculations. Also, accurately measuring the value of digital services and the impact of technological changes on GDP are ongoing challenges. There is also no common international standard in calculating these figures, and each country may have a different method. Furthermore, there are growing calls for alternative measures of well-being that go beyond GDP, such as the Human Development Index, HDI, which is worth looking into. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more insightful content on economics and finance.